special meeting in the Norfolk City Council. We'll call the meeting to order, and to begin, bring your attention to the Open Meetings Act posted here in the council chambers. If you now please join me in rising for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Granquist.
Here.
Arns.
Here.
Merrill.
Here.
McCarthy.
Here.
Murin.
Here.
Jackson.
Here.
Clausen. Hildebrand.
Okay. With that, I would look for a motion to approve the consent agenda with one note. There is a correction to minutes, correct, Brianna?
Yep, on the very last item, Gary Jackson was absent from the meeting, but I got his name under nay instead of absent. So we'll look for approval with that.
So moved.
Correction.
Second.
Motion and second. If no further discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Motion carries.
Would then look for a motion to approve the full agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion and second. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Motion carries.
Okay, that takes us to our regular agenda. Item number 8 on the council agenda. Would look for a motion to consider approval of the plans, specifications, and engineer's estimate on file in the city offices for the Benjamin Avenue from 1st Street to 13th Street reconstruction project and authorization for the city clerk to advertise for bids.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. And for some background on this project, Steve Ramus, our City Public Works Director.
Mayor and Council, this is one of the projects that is defined in our 2030 Master Transportation Plan that was established back in 2006. We've been in the design mode now for the past couple of years. We've been acquiring necessary right-of-way for the project since early or mid-spring of 2021. There are still 3 parcels outstanding, but we're in the end of those conversations with those landowners and would anticipate those parcels being finalized during the bidding, the 4-week bid window here that this project would go out for. Schemmer was selected through an RFP process to be the designer on the project. Doug Hawley is here to represent Schemmer. He's been the project manager on the project. And so I'm going to turn it over to Doug here. He'll kind of walk through the major components of the project, and between Doug and I, we can answer any questions you would have.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Steve. So I put just a brief overview of the project together to walk through today to, if nothing else, re-inform you about the project. I know we've met a few times throughout the design of the project. So, as Steve indicated, the design is complete. Just a brief overview of the design. Really, in addition to being basically a full reconstruction of the project, we are adding a left turn lane really throughout the corridor. We are also adding some right turn lanes at Queen City, at the YMCA, as well as at the middle school to help with the traffic flow in those 3 areas. In addition, we're adding new sidewalk throughout the corridor as well, ranging from 5 feet wide to 8 feet wide, the wider ones being in the areas where there is a trail present. Another component to the project is an enhanced landscaping component of the project. We're going to bid that landscaping component as a bid alternate to be able to separate the cost and depending how the costs come in, make a decision moving forward here whether the landscaping does get included or not with the project. I wanted to talk just briefly about the landscaping piece of it, as this was one of the more later developments in the project. So I've got about 4 images on the slides. Starting at the west end of the project, we're really focusing on about 4 areas throughout the corridor to what we call enhance the landscaping. Starting at 13th Street or Highway 81, we are looking to add some additional street trees in the area, identified kind of by the pink color, as well as landscaping really the one raised median along the project where you can actually put some landscaping in it. Moving east, we focused a little bit on the Queen City Boulevard area, adding some enhanced landscaping in that area, as well as some pedestrian lighting at the intersection of Queen City. I'd say the majority of the focus of the landscaping is kind of in that area, primarily east of Riverside. It's areas where there are some large swaths of parking lot, and this will help to break up some of the large concrete areas within the project area. I do have a rendering of this area shown here. This is kind of a graphic rendering of what this would look like when it's mature. There'd be some planter boxes, some pedestrian lighting, and some decorative concrete paving, kind of separating the street from the sidewalk. And then at the east end of the project towards First Street, we're also proposing to add some additional street trees, decorative trees in the area kind of in front of the YMCA as well as the school area. As far as project status, where we're currently at, you've probably seen NPBD's been relocating their overhead out there. So those utility relocations will be continuing kind of over the winter months. As Steve indicated, the right-of-way is nearly complete. I think there's 3 parcels remaining. And then we're doing the final touches on the specs, specifically the dates that we're gonna put on the contractor as we move this thing forward. I want to talk just briefly about construction phasing. This is a 2-year construction time frame, starting in 22, around April 1st is what we're predicting. Focusing west of Riverside in year 1, so really not impacting the intersection of Riverside in year 1. Year 2, so 2023, then we would do the intersection of Riverside on east to the east end of the project near First Street. Because of Migratory Bird Act, there would need to be some trees removed prior to April 1 to adhere to that federal regulation. Construction cost, we're estimating that $9 to $10 million range, all in with the construction cost. And got a question slide. We'll open it here shortly. I was gonna walk through graphically what the footprint of the project looks like for the group here. And then open it up to questions. So graphically, so starting here at the west end at 13th Street, you can see what the pavement markings would end up looking like. It's basically a 2-way left turn lane throughout the corridor. We get to Riverside, there'll be some new crosswalks, a new traffic signal at Riverside. Continuing east, we are extending the box culvert under the old North Fork of the Elkhorn River and actually replacing the top of that culvert as well with this project, since cars are driving right on top of that structure today. Once we get to the soccer field area, it'll be a full reconstruction on the south side, but on the north side of that area, right now we are just doing some pavement repairs. Those are kind of indicated by the rectangles on this graphic. The pavement in itself is not in terrible shape on the north side. So we're doing the pavement repairs for now in preparation for maybe a future asphalt overlay down the road. At First Street, adding some crosswalks, updating some curb ramps, and supplementing the existing signal with some pedestrian push buttons and so forth. That's an overview of the design quickly, and I do have some slides that can talk about construction phasing during Q&A if we wanted to walk through some of that. So with that, I think we'll entertain questions.
When you're doing construction, you're gonna do head-to-head, one north and south, or south and then north the other way?
Yeah, we will. I figured some questions would go to phasing. So I was gonna show, so this will be the 2022 construction stage. So 13th Street on the left here, As you can see, we're stopping short of Riverside with the red. So the red would indicate what's being under construction. Traffic would be shifted head-to-head to the north side of Benjamin, and then switch back prior to Riverside is what we're thinking right now.
What's the green on Queen City?
The green is, so those are some areas where we're going to have to phase that intersection. So in this case, green means it would stay open temporarily while they get some of these other adjacent streets done. So for instance, get the new driveway to the pharmacy done. Once that's done, we could close Queen City and get Queen City constructed. So the green indicates kind of a phasing of that access.
On your landscaping, I know that's gonna be a separate entity, but, have we talked about a budget for that? Are you looking for a landscape number?
I think right now we're in the, kind of that $1 million range for the enhanced landscaping, which is the trees, the perennials, the pedestrian lighting, and some of the decorative concrete, the planter boxes. There is a little bit of a screening wall as well, in parts of the project, so.
Okay. And Steve, did we determine, is that the city's responsibility to maintain that?
That is the intention, and.
I thought it was, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, will be, that conversation of the enhanced landscaping had come back to a conversation with subcommittee and some landscape folks, I don't know, probably 6-8 months ago, and so that's one of the components we've been working on. And then as a function of that, we would intend to identify not just this corridor, but a couple other corridors in the community within city code as city maintained.
Okay. And so that will come before us at a later date, and the idea there is either you would have some or you would not.
Correct.
Okay.
Doug, we saw with Brosh Avenue reconstruction recently completed here, there was a lot of, beyond the street reconstruction, there was a lot of utility replacement under the street. I know we're dealing with some relocations here, but are we looking at, as part of this project, any utility replacements or major reconstruction of storm sewer or water?
Yeah, so from a public utilities or city utilities perspective, there is a fair amount of storm sewer being replaced on the project. As you may or may not know, there is a large storm sewer trunk line along predominantly the south side of Benjamin. From about Riverside west, we are replacing that. That's the smaller stretches of the pipe. From Riverside east, we are proposing to utilize the existing I think it's a 48 to 60 inch pipe under that stretch out to the river channel. We did we televised that pipe to look at it structurally, and really it's in pretty good shape based on the televising that we did for the project.
Yeah, there's minimal water sewer replacement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Square turn there, is that still gonna be an open intersection?
So square turn, we are still proposing to close the south leg of the intersection, and then the north leg up by Casey's would be curved into more of a 90-degree intersection.
So that will no longer be there.
No longer be a
Down
through,
12
you
feet
cannot cross at
And so
Square Turn.
then will that help with the drainage then? Because there's a big drainage issue there now, where it goes down in front of the houses to the south there.
Yeah, it'll obviously keep any drainage from coming off the road to get down into that square turn area.
So that's what they was complaining, it comes down Benjamin and then right down
Right,
into there.
yep. So now, yeah, it'll stay along together and get picked up as it drains east.
Just a question, noticing that we're gonna start on the west, and then for the first phase, second phase is the east side.
Correct.
So just curious what the reasoning was, west first and east second, or? Why
The
not the east?
the primary reason for phasing it this direction, and you'll hear about the next project next, which is the First Street Bridge, Part of that project is a full closure of First Street. So that Riverside to Benjamin going east will be a detour route for that project. So we wanted to keep this project moving, but really allow that detour to stay open.
Right. So the goal is to run them both concurrently,
Correct.
right? And keep them
That is
as far away from each other as possible. Yeah.
Exactly.
I do have a question on, between like 13th and Riverside and from Riverside to First, do you have any designated crosswalk areas between those intersections?
The Queen City is, there is definitely curb ramps crossing Benjamin at Queen City.
Okay.
That's the predominant, I would call maybe mid-block, not mid-block, but crossing between
Close.
Riverside
Right.
and 13th Street.
How about from Riverside to First Street? Any place
Um,
to cross in between there?
There, right now, we do not show a, with the lack of streets crossing, we don't have any sort of a mid-block crossing designed in the plans right now in that stretch. They would have to go up to Riverside or down to First Street to cross currently.
Does Queen City Boulevard remain without a stoplight?
Big stretch.
Queen City, yeah, it'll remain as a stop control on the north and south, no stop east-west. We did do traffic signal warrants on that throughout the design, and currently, with current traffic volumes, traffic signal is not warranted.
On the box culvert, you extended that out on both sides, and now there'll be sidewalks across there?
That's
On both
correct.
sides?
That's correct.
That's-
Any chance you could put a crosswalk in that area?
Underneath or at grade?
I don't know.
I mean, I think there's always a opportunity to do that, based on the true volume of traffic, on that stretch of Benjamin. I think we want to be very cautious about where and how many crossings we do for pedestrians, and really prefer them to cross at signalized intersections.
The one thing,
Because obviously,
we will have some conduit in there just east of there for the potential of like an RR, one of those rapid flashing beacon pedestrian controlled, just in anticipation of river activity, increased river activity and kayaking, canoeing, potential crossings there. Whether or not we actually do that installation at this time, but we will be putting conduit in there to allow for something like an RFB type pedestrian crossing.
And that was designed, Steve, down towards the east end of the soccer fields there, was it not?
Well,
There's
it
a-
would be,
yeah.
we would anticipate, so the probably big picture futuristically is we would anticipate the potential for an actual signalized intersection at the current YMCA entrance. So that entrance, go,
Right.
yeah. So in the design concept, we did look at that becoming a signalized intersection as traffic and pedestrian traffic started to demand that or warrant a signalized intersection there. That just depends on what happens at the YMCA, future development and demand at that area. But in lieu of that being there as a signalized intersection with pedestrian crossings, having a crossing more directly east of that river bridge or the river culvert. We have crossing activity there right now, and so that is a potential, and we will be putting conduit in the ground there in anticipation of that RFB type crossing there.
Okay. Engineering-wise, things as they are, is it plausible to put a trail under the bridge?
Right, a pedestrian trail,
Yeah.
right now, it'd be a very shallow crossing. I don't have the exact headroom, but it would be a very shallow crossing for bicyclists to ride through there. Walking, maybe a little more feasible.
Yeah, we don't have the headroom for
Right.
a traditional bike-type crossing there.
Yeah, you want a minimum of 8 feet. It's recommended to have 10 feet of clearance, and we definitely don't have that.
So there will be a crossing at pedestrian crossing at Queen City, but that will not be signalized.
That would not be signalized, correct?
On
will
How,
be-
how does that work then?
Yeah.
We'll add some pedestrian signs to sign it as you're approaching that. There's also, assuming there's crosswalks striped on that east leg of Queen City as well. We're only having the crossing on the east leg, not on the west leg, to really try to focus on one location for that crossing. But so signage and the crosswalk pavement markings.
So with this whole project being wider, a little bigger than it is right now, is the speed limit going up, down, or remaining the same?
Right now, we're projecting it to remain the same.
Okay.
We would not be adding, definitely not increasing its speed limit.
Chief, would it be your opinion that a crosswalk, more of a lighted crosswalk there would be indicated for public safety? Or Scott, I guess I could ask you the same question.
Well, I'm not the engineer, so I'm not in a position to say it. What I will say is any crosswalks in that area are going to need to be marked and probably lighted. Because the problem you have when you have 2 lanes both directions, one car slows down to stop, person starts to cross, the other vehicle doesn't see it, and they come by, and then we have a collision. And anytime you're crossing a roadway like that, I like the idea of the under roadway crossings significantly better because of the risks that are involved. So I would encourage a lighted crosswalk from a common sense standpoint, seeing it day by day.
Sure.
I do have concerns anytime we are trying to cross, especially not at an intersection. Motorists don't always pay attention to them like they should, and that's a concern.
And Steve, do we have that wired?
We can certainly, we would have the conduit in the ground, but we could certainly add the RRFB. That's a fairly small cost, 10 grand to put in an RRFB there and have that pedestrian signal component.
I guess I'd like to see at that YMCA one and at the Queen City one, a lighted one where it's activated by pushing a button. So it's not timed where everybody has to stop all the time, but if there's a pedestrian wanting to go across, there's one over on, is it Elm Street on 13th? That area, there's one over there for crossing Highway 13. And it's just as busy. And I'm sure Benjamin's busier at certain times of the day than 13th. So I'd like to see that put in there. Automatically, it should be.
Are you requesting something more than the rapid flashing beacon?
Councilman?
Can you just expand on exactly what that would look like? Just to, not expand on it, but just tell me what exactly that would
More of
look
a
like, and what
pedestrian-
kind of, how would the driving public know?
Yeah.
I mean, on a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, it's pedestrian actuated, and then there's strobe lights that turn on when it's activated.
Okay.
Typically, that's on a 1-lane road each direction. I think there's been a few instances where it's been put on like a 4-lane road, but typically it's on a 2-lane, one-way each direction type crossing.
See, I was talking about a red light, yellow light, green light
Right,
over each side,
yeah,
activated by a pedestrian pushing a button.
Sure.
That way everybody would see it.
yep. And I think in order to add those, you do have to go through a traffic signal warrant, a study to make sure that it's truly warranted. And right now, although there are pedestrians that use it, there's not enough pedestrians to warrant that type of a pedestrian actuated signal along this corridor. That is something we did studies.
I guess I wouldn't necessarily think we would have to have an overhead light there
Sure.
if, in fact, the strobes and all of that kind of thing were sufficient enough for everybody to get the message
Yeah.
and actually stop.
Yeah.
I would prefer, if we're gonna light it, to do it with a strobe. I think we need to encourage, to the extent we can, that if people really wanna cross the road, to cross that at Riverside or First Street, or in the future, you know, if we were to signalize something right there at the Y. Would be where I'm at, but we will, you know, we'll take those, we'll take that, and we can certainly add the RFB at Queen City in there at the Y.
I think that would be a wise idea.
There are not many opportunities for pedestrians to cross north-south on this stretch. So the few opportunities there are, I think, need to be very visible and made as safe as they can be.
Sure.
I got, I think one more, maybe two more questions, but at first, and this might be more directed towards Steve. At First and Benjamin, on the north side, traffic headed west, doesn't look like it's part of this proposal. So it'd be at the far end where the vehicle is there, the right-hand side. Nope, the north side, westbound. Go over to your right. There you go, that white track.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
so that concrete is broke up right there. Have
We-
we looked at that as part of this?
Yeah, and I don't know if Doug wants to answer that, but we will be doing pavement repair to the east of that intersection. I think, I can't remember how far we were looking for, 400 or 500 feet kind of there to the east. So basically up to the bridge, kind of, again, once in, once out. We want to get in there and fix as much as we can there. And so with the repair component on that north half between First and the river, you know, we'll have the contractor in place there, and we want to do that. We have kind of taken care of First Street going north. We know we're going to have to come back and focus towards the end of this project on First Street going south, but we will take care of that kind of up to the flood control.
As part of this, or just something that we're doing separately?
We will do that as part of this.
Okay.
The part to the east.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's definitely about, 500 to 700 feet where there's panels, and it changes every year, as you know. It never gets better.
North side of Benjamin across from Burger King. If you just pan over there, I just wanted to look at that quick. Oh, would I? Yeah, so the entrance exit going into the, if you want to call it plaza, but the multiple buildings on the north side of the road there.
Right.
Why, I guess my question is, why move it from the current entrance?
This drive here,
Yeah.
because we always want to align drives as much as possible when you have an opportunity for vehicles to be going eastbound or westbound to make a left turn lane. So by aligning them, you avoid that potential conflict of left turners trying to turn into the opposite left turners. So we have, and in addition, that also aligns well for trucks or heavier vehicles to get in between Mr. Metalman's buildings as well.
Was there consideration of doing only one access to that property rather than two? Those seem pretty close together.
Yeah, we originally, this drive was not originally designed. It was proposed to be closed originally. There was concern about that from the property owner, and what we ended up doing is making that a right in, right out driveway to continue to provide access, but to eliminate some of the safety concerns we had about people, especially turning left out of there. That's where the majority of the crashes occur. It also helps with proximity to the traffic signal. Putting a full access drive there is definitely not recommended.
So there will be an island.
There will be a kind of, raised island both between the sidewalk and curb as well as behind the curb to really prevent a left turn out or a left turn into that drive.
So Paul is all right with that?
Mr. Metalman hasn't officially signed, but it sounds like we're pretty close
All
on
right.
the right-of-way acquisition.
In the middle school, they pleased with that concept?
The middle school has signed, so to me, that's an indicator that they are on board with this. We
Right.
did have multiple meetings with them throughout the project. So.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions, council?
I guess I just have a comment. This is a big project for us. We've been waiting a long time for this. But I just wanted to make a comment that as we go through this process, to start the actual construction of it is, the big thing is gonna be communication with the business, the homeowners, and the citizens through the city website, through the newspaper, the radios, where we're at, what we're doing. I just think it's, as a team, we need to all be on the same page, for everybody's safety, and then for the communication people to get around the community. It's gonna be during different times of the year, schools and holidays and festivals and different things, so that people know that we're still open for business, but we'll do the best we can. And everybody's gonna be patient, because I think once this project is done, it's gonna be a nice investment for our community.
Well said, Councilman. And maybe that is a good segue into talking about some of the timing here. So with this action, should the council take it, we would authorize going to bid on construction. And Steve, maybe you can talk about what that means in terms of timing. When would the bid actually be let? When would we expect closing of it? And then potential construction?
You have the advertising right there. So we will be advertising this until January 17th. Put it on the bottom for me, Doug. First advertisement would hit the paper on January 20th. Last advertisement would be February 10th.
Right.
And go back up. There's about a week's delay in there, 2 weeks delay. We open up bids on the 17th. So big project, a lot going on. Also, when the Johnson Park project is going to be on the table for bids as well. And so between the two, we want to make sure we have enough time going on there. Opening bids again on February 17th. We would expect to be in front of council on March 7th for bid award.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Doesn't look like it. Thank you, Doug.
You bet.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I would ask for your vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
All right, that takes us to item number 9. I would entertain a motion to consider approval of the plans, specifications, and engineer's estimate on file in the city offices for the First Street Bridge and in-stream improvements project, and authorization for the city clerk to advertise for bids.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second, and for some background again on this, Steve Ramus, please.
Mayor and council, before you today is actually 3 different projects that are being rolled into one bid advertisement, all related to the Johnson Park and in-river improvements at First Street and the North Fork to the Elkhorn River. And with us today to provide a little bit more detail is Nathan Boone with J.E.O.'s, and leading the overall design teams for the project. And so here in a minute, I'll have him walk through this. The 3 components that are bidding as a function of this bid set are the in-stream improvements that were designed by Riverwise out of Durango, Colorado. Those improvements start on the North Fork between the Hy-Vee grocery store and the Hy-Vee gas station, or south of Norfolk Avenue, and progress about 1,800 feet up the river, terminating, the majority of the work terminating just south of the old railroad bridge, the Trestle Bridge. In a separate project with a local donor, that Trestle Bridge will be relocated about 400 feet downstream as part of this overall project. There is a little bit of work that's going to take place all the way up at Winter Park, and that will be an input point, kind of a northern input point to get in and run through those in-stream improvements. The second component of the project is the replacement of the First Street Bridge across the North Fork River. As a function of that, there'll be sidewalks underneath First Street on both the north and south side of the river. So you'll be able to enjoy the trail system and cross over there without conflicting with northbound and southbound First Street traffic. Finally, the third component is some significant drainage improvements in the roundabout there at Brosh and First. And the drainage was, most of the drainage, we did a significant drainage improvement on Brosh from 4th or 5th to 1st, back when we built that here a couple of years ago. But knowing that we had this work that was gonna go on, we terminated that at First Street, the west side of First Street, so we'll be extending that storm sewer system down to Norfolk Avenue and then constructing the roundabout. So those are the three components, and with that, I'll turn it over to Nathan to kind of walk you through.
Sure, thank you, Stephen. All right, so I am going to go one slide back. And then the reason for that is Stephen did a really good job of encapsulating all of the three various projects that are wrapped into this one that we're here primarily for discussion today. I do want to point out there are multiple other projects in this vicinity. So while this project involves those three, what it's also doing is it's setting the stage for future work that's going to that is planned within Johnson Park, whether it's the parking lot improvements, the restroom, grading, sidewalks, as well as future amenities, as you'll see in the green in Project 4, which would be for an amphitheater, skating rink, various amenities that the community can use for years to come. So this is the only snapshot I have of all of the projects together, but you can see how they all intertwine as one massive improvement project over the next few years. So I advance to the next page. So everything in blue is really what we're talking about to be approved for advertisement today. So we're calling this project 1 is what we're calling it, and within this project I'm gonna explain it in multiple phases. So phase 1, 2 through 3, if you will. Okay, so phase 1 is really going to occur. You can see in the in-stream improvements in green, we're going to start on the downstream area adjacent to Norfolk Ave. So it'll occur just south where the Highview Trail ties into the new trail system. It goes underneath Norfolk Avenue and extends upstream just a little ways. Along Norfolk Ave, in the red, and this is really small, and I have additional information later on specific to this location, but this is the storm sewer improvements that Stephen was talking about. So this picks up the storm improvements that were done as part of Brosh Avenue and extends them further south. Now you may ask, well, the stream or the channel is right there. Why don't we just pop in? It's a lot shorter. It'd be a lot cheaper, more cost effective. Well, we certainly looked at that, but because of the stream improvements and the elevations of the water elevation within that, where the storm sewer is, it really doesn't work. The storm sewer is approximately 12 feet down below the surface or the street surface as it exists today. The stream is not. It's considerably higher than that. So we'd have to put a pump in, a significant cost, maintenance efforts in order to get the storm sewer out. So we identified a really good tie-in point on East Norfolk Avenue in order to extend that. And we're going to break that up into a couple phases so we can keep Norfolk Avenue open during construction. As well, the other item that's going to start in May, really as soon as we get notice to proceed, is removing of this bridge structure. And the reason this is a very, very critical item is that's the longest lead time of everything that we're working on here. And the reason we need to get that going first is because by the time that is removed and the contractors done with that removal and all the structure that supports it, the stream work will be up to that point. And so we can kind of hand off from one subcontractor to another throughout this contract in order to move forward. So this is May through June of 2022. Then we move on to July through August of 2022. So as you can see, the green has advanced further upstream. So it entails everything near the bend downstream up to First Street. It also continues some of the bridge work. There's maybe some additional removals, some subsurface removals. There's the spillway that's there. There's some walls. There's some railings. There's a lot of features that are there that we need to make sure we properly remove to minimize the amount of, or to be efficient with the stream work that's coming down the road. Also, at that point, we'll have moved street work up from Norfolk Avenue up to the roundabout. So this will remove portions of First Street, portions of Brush Avenue in order to facilitate the construction of the roundabout itself. So now this leads into September through October of 2022 of this year. Again, continuing to work on the roundabout. The stream work is now jumped to the west side of First Street, and there's certainly some tie-in issues, there's some tie-ins, some finishing up downstream, but the bulk of the work will be between the railroad and First Street, as well as the drop-in point at Winter Park. The bridge will still be under construction. All the removals are behind us. It's now the new structure, everything starting to tie up the finish ends. It looks more like what it would be when the project is complete. You'll see some red little squigglies. These are some trails that we're starting to put in because a lot of the grading has occurred. And then moving into where is it? So this shows through October. November through December is continuing to install some of the trails. So some additional red, so this little area on the west side, tying in some of these drop structures along the stream. But overall, from a schedule standpoint, Norfolk Avenue, as I mentioned, 14 calendar days for each of the subphases within that, and I'll go into detail on what the traffic plan looks like and how we plan to redirect traffic. For First and Brosh, we have the roundabout and all streets fully open to traffic as of November 1st. That's the goal we're telling the contractor. Trails and sidewalks, we want fully open December 1st of this year as well. We do have the contract continuing on through May 31st of next year. And really that's to button up some of the seeding, the vegetation, things like that. As we get into the winter months, it just becomes too cold to put those plants and seed down and expect them to thrive throughout the winter. So final punch list items. So overall, the cost of all of this, so everything that I've showed you in the blue, as well as these multiple colors here, is between $7 and $8 million for construction. So now I can dive into a little more detail for some of these areas. So phase one, as I mentioned, is this bridge replacement. So construction duration for this segment is 6 months. So late April, early May to early November, excuse me, is what we're anticipating for that. And then phase 2A and 2B, this is along Norfolk Ave, storm sewer replacement, construction duration of approximately a month, so 14 days per subphase. Anticipating as soon as the contract is signed, so late April, early May through June. So this is the detour for this phase. And this is really a driver in that First Street would be fully closed in order to allow for that bridge to be removed. So as Doug mentioned, Benjamin Avenue phase 1 for 2022 is everything west of Riverside. And the reason for that is because we really need Benjamin Avenue open east and uninhibited to allow for the detour for this project. So detours northbound will begin on First Street, then go west on Pace Walk, then north on 4th Street to Riverside, and then to Benjamin east before continuing north again on First Street. Southbound, again, most of that in reverse, so First Street to Benjamin, to Riverside, to 4th Street, and then instead of getting to Pace Walk, we have them going to Madison Avenue. And the reason for that is to keep as much traffic as we can off of Norfolk Ave with the pedestrian numbers that are there, as well as parking, and it made more sense to redirect traffic elsewhere. Now the locals, everyone who understands where all the street system is, they're gonna go wherever they wanna go regardless of how we sign it. So that's something that we'll have to keep in mind throughout the project to make sure we communicate with the contractor and with really just the community as a whole of this is the established detour route. But a lot of locals tend to find the route that works best for them in their situation. So again, looking in more detail as far as how we would detour this along Norfolk Avenue. So again, we would start on the south side, and the reason is this dashed line here is the existing storm sewer. So our tie-in is literally right in the middle of those southern or the outside lanes. So you work on a few panels there. We would actually shift traffic over one of the medians, so everything is on the current westbound traffic lanes for now. Work on this over a couple weeks, and then once that's complete, we would divert traffic. Quickly switch to the other side. We would divert traffic to the eastbound lanes and work on the north side of that intersection. And then once that is complete, the Norfolk Avenue is completely open again. And the work will continue on to the phase 3 of this project, which is the roundabout. So construction duration, we're estimating 5 months, so June through early November. And then again, the bridge work will continue moving forward throughout this entire process. And again, this is what it would look like when Norfolk Avenue is complete. So we would limit, there'd be no northbound movements north of Norfolk Avenue. Everybody would be allowed or be instructed to turn right to go eastbound, or they would make a left turn to go westbound. We would maintain alley access from 2nd to 1st Street, but it would be a right turn only to go southbound on that. And we would close Brosh Avenue down between the parking lot and 1st Street. So access would be maintained for the properties within this area. We would certainly work with, or plan to work with the homeowners, both on the south side of the channel as well as the north side, and through right-of-way negotiations. We've certainly been having those conversations. There are 4 pieces of right-of-way that are in the process or nearing final acquisition. So the YMCA, a couple, a home, or not a home, but part of a residential property, a couple of residential properties, and then some sliver on the west side of the east side of 1st Street. Let's see, a couple other pieces that are going to be going on with this. So because of the stream work that's going on, we will need to provide some wetland mitigation. So on the north side of town, between Benjamin and 1st Street is actually going to be a wetland mitigation site. We were hoping to, the original plan was to put this along the stream directly within the project area. It's not the most ideal, both from a construction standpoint as well as a mitigation site standpoint. Certainly doable, but it makes more sense to try to get it to it's a totally dedicated area. And this is the area we identified that you can see in green. We're currently working with the Corps to file an adjustment. So we do have approval for mitigation work to date, so we can move the project forward. But we want to inform them that, hey, this is where we're planning to adjust the site to. We're going to stick with everything else they requested, and then we should be able to move forward without any hurdles. Also a part of this project that's not necessarily part of the bid, but as far as some coordination effort, is certainly the Geary Bridge. So as Stephen mentioned, the existing truss structure to the west of 1st Street is something that will move further east. So this project itself will it'll move some earthwork and create some abutments. So it'll create the approaches for that structure. And part of the coordination effort through all of this construction is to actually, the Garys and their contractors, et cetera, or that entity to actually move the bridge east along the river during the construction process of what we'll be involved with. So we'll be supporting that through earthwork, and then their contractors will work on the pilings as well as some backfill, putting the structure in place. That'll all be done by them, but certainly all in coordination. As far as schedule, here now, so looking at the invitation to bid, with approval to advertise today, we would be really a week behind where Doug and the Benjamin Avenue project is. We would start advertising January 27th, as well as throughout the month of February. And we would have a bid opening February 24th, and then also be on the March 7th council agenda for award of that project. So you'll see both projects together hand in hand. With that, I will open it up for conversation.
How deep will that river be in the new areas?
What's that?
How deep will it be?
How deep will it be? So we have,
And how do you maintain that depth without the spillway? I know there's a way to do it. I just got asked this question. I didn't know the answer.
so throughout the stream work is these various drop structures will go in. So let me see if I can find one that gives a little more detail, and that can help answer this question.
I explained it by stepping down, and they didn't understand that. So.
Yeah, so it's basically some really long steps. If you look at that entire set of stream as a set of steps. So step 1 is really from Norfolk Ave, which is down here, south of Norfolk Ave, up to the north side of Norfolk Ave. Step 2 is basically from this structure up to the next one, and then subsequently continues further upstream. I can certainly find.
So going over those steps, is it like a shallow rapid or?
It is, yep, because it's a whitewater park. It's funneled into a specific area, so there's 3 flow levels that have been analyzed and calculated and determined as part of the analysis effort. And those 3 levels determine the depth of the water, as well as how it goes through each of these structures. Drop structures is what they're called. And so depending on the competition or the recreation level, those flow levels can fluctuate, or can be fluctuated and managed by the city.
When you go to take out the existing gates that are there, and if we do have a large amount of moisture at that, during that time, will we have some downstream flooding, or will these structures take care of some of that?
So because of the bypass that's in place, this does not function as a flood structure whatsoever. It's purely there for recreation and use. Now, if there's immediate needs within the basins that do flow into this, then yes, this will handle any of that flow. So it won't, as a whole, operate any differently than what it does today, where it's.
I mean, during the construction part of it.
Are they gonna shut it down up, the spillway up there?
So during construction, then it's certainly something we'll have to, so if the water level is closed, so the water level at the gates will be closed off. I think I see what you're saying now. So so those will be closed off. So this will receive, if there's a big storm, yes, this will receive flow from that storm. And we've laid that language out within our project document so the contractor is aware of that. While the water can be closed off or controlled through this, during rain events, that is certainly something they need to be aware of, and they'll have to de-water, pump the water out if that occurs.
Okay.
So that risk of working within a channel,
Yep.
river channel for sure.
That's just one of the questions I was asked.
Yeah.
Okay.
Will these in-stream structures, will they need any type of maintenance at all?
I mean, Steve, I don't know if you've had a chance to talk with Shane. I mean, the idea is that they function in perpetuity. I mean, there really is not a whole lot of maintenance that needs to go into them. The boulders are sized such that they'll stay in place. They won't move around like a natural bed with boulders, and a big flood event comes will look very different after the flood than it does before the flood. This, because it's a very controlled environment and they're sized and weighted appropriately, the maintenance throughout this should be very minimal. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Stephen.
Yeah, I would say I see no real maintenance to it. Obviously, to the extent there is pedestrian ingress egress points, if there's pedestrian damage, I guess, or damage caused by pedestrians or something like that, yeah, there would have to be some maintenance. Somebody goes in there with a chisel or hammer or axe and starts banging on things. But just from a normal river flow perspective, I don't see any long-term maintenance.
Would there be any major changes to Winter Park? Is it just expanded parking, just cleaning it up, have a little ingress, egress?
There's nothing in this project, aside from building the access point right there on that southwest corner of the park. There's no other improvements or parking or otherwise at this time. There is a bigger conversation that as we see how the river is used, and as different events might occur, I would expect we might have to allow possibly some on-grass parking or something like that for maybe a special event once a year. We also have the park area on the west side of Winter Park over there where I think there's some basketball courts, tennis courts on that area, and a parking lot over there. Potential concept to maybe connect that a little bit better for parking and access.
Steve, once this project is done, will there still be Winter Park utilized for excess snow?
I would say both short-term and long-term, yes. Even if we were to develop a parking lot or something on that east side, south of Winter Park, aside from hauling that volume somewhere else, which certainly could be a conversation, that is currently a storage facility for snow removal. But we can always have a conversation about moving that somewhere else.
I just didn't know if we waited till we see how that develops, the usage and everything else. I know in the spring it's pretty rough and the guys do a good job of cleaning it up when it does all melt and dries up, but.
Yeah. I mean, if it's paved, it would be easier. You go in there with sweepers and sweep up the silts and sands and stuff that develop from a snow removal perspective. Any kind of paving would probably hasten the snow removal process as well.
What about like a major rain event? Hopefully we never have another one where it fills up the flood control like we had, but obviously this canal would take a lot of water on also. So looking at if that would happen again, significant damage or not?
No, there wouldn't be any damage to this. In 2019, a flood very similar to 2019, we closed the gates to the north side because we don't want to store any potential flood water within the city. So we closed those gates during those heavy events in the flood control system and just allow any in-city rain events to collect into the river. During that 2019 event, with the flood control system at flood level and the gates to the north of the city closed, the gates to the south that outlet the North Fork River, those are also hydraulically closed by the water pressure in the flood control system. So we are at risk as a community in an event like that. If we were to get a 6-inch rain within the city, we would fill up the North Fork River. And we did see a little bit of that. And I think people that live along there would attest to that water level started to fill up, and I think all the way up into Johnson Park here in this bridge, that water level was probably 8 feet higher than it normally is, or 6 feet higher than it normally is. And so we would, we're always at that risk. This project has no impact on that risk.
But Steve, in that situation, we didn't incur really any flooding, property damage within the North Fork corridor.
We were not. The Nucor Detailing Center was probably the most at risk in that 2019 event. We had brought pumps in all the way from Indiana to be able to control that.
Would we say that this bridge should help flow water better than the box culvert bridges? Or is it the same because it's the same type of volume? I don't know. It looks wider, or yeah.
You're going to have more of an unobstructed flow, so we're not going to have the turbulence that we would have necessarily downstream, directly downstream of First Street right now as a function of that large flume. And so from that perspective, I would say you're going to see a more consistent laminar flow throughout the system.
And we do have a trail and a sidewalk adjacent to the stream under the bridge as well. So additional length allows for that undercrossing.
Is that on both sides?
Correct.
I know one of the conversations throughout planning for this project was returning the river to its more natural course, and by removing the spillway should greatly enhance the fish habitat and fishing opportunities within
each of these 8 structures on the south side is a little bit hard to see, but on the south side of each of these structures, there's a fish channel that runs through there. I can see it in here in these 3 areas, but you kind of see there's, bring your hand down, Nathan, a little bit. So that right there, that is a fish channel that runs through. On either side of that channel is a rock wall. And so the ability for aquatic species to move up and down the system are greatly enhanced with this project.
What about that current, I guess if you want to call it the gatehouse or whatever that might be, that's right on the corner? What's our plans with that and the current gates that are there? The
gates will be relocated to a location unknown. that's yet to be determined on exactly what that will look like. That's the existing gates. The gatehouse, the plan is to leave the gatehouse there. That could be like a visitor's information kiosk. There might be an ability to do some retail component out of there. An observation deck to look out over the river, but we've had several conversations around exactly what that might look like. I don't believe there's any dollars in phase one. I don't think phase one addresses anything there, so that would be addressed as a function of phase two or phase three.
That also has been part of the conversation. This project's important in my mind in that it goes back to the history of this community. This is where Norfolk started, and given where that gatehouse is, and it remains one of the few historical markers of this area, I think it's important to have it remain intact and, in fact, utilize it as a space to help tell the story of this area and the community's birth.
Scroll down, or scroll up, I'm sorry. On that. How close is that roadway to that YMC building?
Let me see if I can measure it.
He can probably,
Wider than it seems.
I
but
believe it's 16 feet.
I think it's even more than that.
Could even be more than that. As a function of the conversations with the YMCA on that, we're gonna take that seat wall concept that we have on Johnson Park, and right in that narrowest area up there in that northeast corner, we'll put a seat wall right up against the sidewalk along there, just to provide a little bit of additional protection up in that area, or
Yeah, I can draw exactly where it is.
yeah.
Yeah, so we'll be putting, it's really hard to tell on this, but we'll be putting a seawall roughly right in here.
And how high is that?
Similar to what's on Brosh, so
Probably 24 inches or so.
yeah.
Since we're talking about this right by the roundabout, we're hearing, at least I am, I assume others are too, but an astounding amount of people not in favor of the roundabout. So I think it's worth discussing, and whether that should be a part of this project, shouldn't be a part of this project, should stay 4-lane and not reduce to 2-lane for roundabout and back out to 4-lane. So I think that'd be a good discussion for us to have. I personally feel that, and you guys have heard this from me before, but that should stay 4-lane and not be a roundabout. And I'll be honest, that's what I constantly hear from the public too. So that's the part of this project I probably have the biggest grief with. Everything else I definitely can follow along with, but I think it's worth us discussing this a little bit further and where we go from here on this.
So you're saying don't put those up for bid?
I'm saying, me personally, I cannot necessarily support this being a roundabout the way it is. I could support it going to bid without a roundabout in it. I could support it as being a straight 4-lane and not doing all of this at this area, definitely. But I think it's worth some discussion. I'm not here to tell people which way to vote, but I'm telling you that the way I see it, there's support in the rest of this, in all of the phases through Johnson's Park and the river and all that, but
I think
this is the one that stands out as being an issue of this whole design.
I think there's been a lot of discussion on it, and I think the point of the roundabout and taking it from 4 lanes to 2 lanes is to slow down traffic, because people don't slow down up there. If you left it 4 lane, it isn't gonna slow down. And if we want projects or things to go on in that park where people are walking around, that's not a good area to have them flying through. And it's only a few blocks that you're talking about.
Yeah, but they can actually cross under the bridge in 2 spots. So I guess with that being said, can you go through with phase 1, phase 2A and 2B, and hold off on phase 3 right now?
I guess,
I-
you know, I wasn't necessarily prepared for that question, but I know over the last 2 or 3 years as we've been in design on this, that conversation has been brought in for either full special council conversation and vote or subcommittee, at least 3 times. And so, I think that conversation has occurred. I guess I just bring that to the table for,
I was going to note that too. I mean, these are public discussions, always open for full and open debate on these things. But just looking at the history of this roundabout proposal is nothing new. I mean, this came in planning for the Brosh reconstruction project. It was part of that project. It was approved as part of that project, but this part of it was held off, knowing that we potentially were going to do the bridge replacement work and everything else in conjunction with Johnson Park and First Street. The full council approved this plan, including the first and Brosh roundabout on April 6, 2020. I think we want to be very careful about approving plans, going through the design, full design for them, and then potentially backing off when it's time to go to bid. I think that's poor form and bad practice, and sets a pretty bad precedent for doing large projects and making large investments.
I don't necessarily disagree, Mayor. I think if you look at the record, I was probably on there as a no vote and been against it from the very beginning. So, like I said, I'm not here to change somebody's vote. I would prefer that stay 4-lane all the way through. I think, as Gary's discussing on pedestrians, it's very possible. We have two ways of pedestrian traffic underneath the bridge, and I know there was talk of pedestrian traffic above because we have a trail right there. There's no reason that we couldn't do the same crosswalk with crosswalk lights that we're just talking about on Benjamin. That has a heck of a lot more traffic than this, by the way.
The other thing we want to remember is at some point in time, Old Mill Plaza there is going to be redone. And that kind of plays into all of that.
But we don't know what that looks like.
Well, I think it's important to remember that we're making these changes and improvements not for just what is in front of us today,
I've seen
but what we're planning for in
at the meeting.
years ahead.
Out of the Lifelong Learning Center.
Not final yet.
And the roundabout, again, I'll go back to, this wasn't a process in which we're throwing darts at the map saying, okay, maybe we should introduce a new roundabout here. This was done by traffic engineers who studied the Brosh corridor, who also took into consideration this project we're talking about today. And there was a roundabout proposed here that was approved by the council. There was also a roundabout in terms of that project at 4th and Brosh that the council decided didn't fit. But we've made plans, again, emphasizing this, we've made plans and paid a lot of money to consultants to do the design work to go forward with this. I think, and Corey, you're right, you've been consistent throughout. You've been consistent throughout. It wasn't a unanimous vote to go forward, and that's fair. But we did give direction to the staff to go forward, authorize contracts, spend money to design this out like this. And I think for good reason. For traffic control, it's not only about people crossing, it's about having what I think will be a very active park space in the middle of a commercial area where you're going to have people wanting to cross at the street. Between two pretty active developments for what's planned on Brosh redevelopment and First and Norfolk Avenue and the park, you're gonna have people in this area on foot. And the way it is right now with 4 lanes of traffic and cars not stopping, because they don't, which is why I had the concern on Benjamin, expressed that concern about Benjamin crossings, that 4 lanes of traffic, people do not stop, and people don't necessarily take full awareness of their surroundings. This is about public safety, I think. It's also about economic development and growth. And I also remember a component of this discussion about this roundabout from our public safety professionals with concerns about northward movements on Brosh Street, on First from Brosh. That was one of the driving factors for this concept design.
Nathan, if you could, I guess, if, as a function of the conversation, I think I saw you quickly blip at some general concepts. The way the project is set up in terms of landscaping, we have a landscape allowance that will be included in the bid documents. And they have, will kind of provide this as some guidance to the low bidder. And just kind of show the 1, 2, 3 concepts if you could there.
Yep, so here's the first one at a plan view with the sculpture in the middle. Integrates limestone slabs that the city has currently within their possession, as well as various plantings that are present along Brosh and other areas of the greater downtown area. Inspiration for the sculpture, grain-inspired sculpture based on Norfolk's historic flour mill, the Ponca tribe tribute sculpture, a river water themed sculpture. Certainly up for discussion and for future consideration. And then the last concept is if the sculpture did not go in, expansion of or additional plantings throughout, multi-level plantings throughout the roundabout.
So, plants aside, where does this actually narrow from 4 lanes to 2 on the north end, and where on the south end? Just refresh my memory if you would.
Yeah, so really, in a nutshell, on the north end, it really is from Prospect down to the bridge, thereabouts, give or take a little space. So it's not any further north than that. So I would say railroad to the bridge on the north side is where it tapers down, and then on the south side, it occurs south of Norfolk Ave. So the right lane would be a right-only lane, and there would be a single northbound through lane.
That transition, I think, takes place between Madison and Norfolk?
Correct.
Right. Okay.
And the light remains at Madison.
At this time, we're not proposing any changes at Madison Avenue.
So, again, going back, there's a lot of history to this. This discussion and planning started 3-4 years ago. And this question about transitioning from 4 to 2, inclusion of roundabout, has been discussed significantly. There were requests made for traffic studies, for traffic projection, traffic flow projection. Steve, can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, we did a real-time projection of traffic flows given the incorporation of this roundabout.
Yeah.
Correct.
So this, we modeled this out, for sure we did 20-year model on this. And there's no issues with traffic volume. Certainly, what we don't necessarily have an ability to model is how the installation of this is going to change traffic. And so something like this will have an impact in terms of changing local traffic modeling as well. But right now at that particular intersection, I believe the number's around 11,000 vehicles a day. That's non-distributed traffic, so both northbound, southbound traffic. But well within the volume capacities of a single lane roundabout, recognizing that roundabout doesn't necessarily stop. You know, that's more of a continuous flow versus a signalized type intersection that does have intermittent stop-start. So your volume capacities at these roundabouts is significantly different than a 4-lane stopped intersection. But it was modeled by, I would say, is potentially one of the, if not the leading traffic engineer in the state of Nebraska. He did not have any issues with the installation of a roundabout.
I can expand that did include projections based on anticipated development within the area as well, to make sure not only to support what's out there now, but what potentially could come in the future within potential development within the area.
So I do recall, prior to the spring of 2020, we had quite the debate on the subject, both at subcommittee and finally at full council. And I thought at the time, the debate process did us good. We had a lot of opinions on both sides, but ultimately at full council decided to go with what we're looking at here today. I can recall one of my concerns was pedestrian crossing over the roundabout, which was taken care of by bridges on both sides under the street, and a bridge, I think, from one side of the river to the other, as I recall, that gets you where you need to go, which would help reduce the pedestrian traffic up on top. So, but as I say, it was full debate on the issue, and ultimately decided to do what we're looking at here today.
Just one last statement. I'm trying to stay quiet, I guess, after I already said most of what I had to, but with 3 different ways of pedestrian traffic, I still don't necessarily see a reason to congest traffic, whether I understand engineers looked at it, it's possible. They look at many traffic studies and obviously make their engineering decisions, but what we're hearing inside this community is they don't necessarily want that, and constantly hearing that. So that reducing it from 2 to 4, backing up traffic past Madison Avenue, having a train come through town and backing it up all the way through the roundabout, every concern has come up. So it's, although I like the idea of renovating Johnson's Park, a park I grew up in, this whole area, renovating this whole area, honestly, Norfolk Avenue through Barrage, through Johnson's Park. I mean, it's wonderful, and hopefully something happens in that large parking lot at First and Norfolk Avenue also. But it's a tough one there for me, to be honest. As for cost, we went through with some design work on roundabouts on Benjamin also. And yeah, it ended up costing us money to switch that back to being a 5-lane and no roundabout. And that's how I look at this, is lesson learned, but I think personally it's something that we should do and just re-engineer and leave it the way it is at 4 lanes. So, but I mean, everybody, obviously we can sit up here and have a cordial conversation, and that's a very good thing. And we can all express our opinions, and that's a very good thing. So that's all I'm doing. I'm in favor of the project, just not this portion of it. So.
And I think, with all due respect, that's fair. That's consistent, Corey, with what you've said prior. And I think we've voted on this at least once that I can remember on record to move forward with this design as a council. Maybe twice. I think it's been through subcommittee 2 or 3 different times. And as far as what we hear in the community, I think that depends on who you're talking to, because I hear about the opposite of what you're saying. I hear that this, in conjunction with everything else happening in this area, is a very good project for the city of Norfolk and will help fully utilize an area that is important to our city's history, historic park that could use renovation and become a people attraction that will help bring people to town, be another quality of life enhancement that helps retain our youth. And so, all in all, yes, it's change, and change is hard sometimes, but I do have to give a lot of credit to this council in recent years for being willing to make hard decisions that help our community grow into the future. I look at this as one of those. And I think if we went back on our word at this point and decided to try to tinker with design plans that have been approved by the council multiple times in the past, we will live to regret that decision. And we'll have shorted ourselves on a project that has a lot of value for us moving forward and could be a legacy project for Norfolk. And I do, without this, have serious public safety concerns with 4 lanes of traffic and a new injection of pedestrians and people wanting to be in this area. I think it would be foolhardy to think 4 lanes of traffic in between all of these things that are being improved and will be more activated than they are now. We would be borrowing trouble. So that's my opinion. Are there any more questions or comments on this, council?
I just, my thought is, I think the crossing under the bridge alleviates a lot of safety concern. That's just my opinion. I really do. I mean, we're looking, I realize a little more traffic here, but, you know, we just talked about Benjamin. We got 5 lanes up there and we have no place for them to cross. And here we have 2 sidewalks already underneath the bridge. So I'm not so sure the safety of the pedestrians is at issue with as much crossing as they have underneath that bridge. But
Rick, have you tried to cross the street down there recently?
at
At the crossing at First and into Johnson Park?
no,
Yeah, it's not easy.
but
It's
I'll try
dangerous.
it when there's a sidewalk under the bridge.
So we, given the chance and given the council's prior direction to do this, we should just leave it as it is, because
No,
we think that there may not be problems in the future. I guarantee you, with more people in that area, not everybody's going to go down to that trail beneath the bridge. They want to cross at grade. And I think if we go back again on our word, what this council has already said, go forward with, we will live to regret that decision.
And then to support, I'm not supporting what Frank's saying, but in his defense, he might not have been here for those meetings.
Right.
The
I think that's another note to make, that this has been discussed in full.
Yeah, the other thing at the point is, Frank, out there at the Old Mill Plaza, have you been out to the Lifelong Learning Center when they've had meetings about what they're gonna do there, or what they're projecting to do there?
Yes.
I know there's no plan set in stone, but when that project happens, people aren't gonna walk down to the river to go underneath to go over there, they'll walk straight across. And this is gonna help slow that all down. And that's the point of it, is to make it a safer area and safer crossing.
And beyond that, we've heard as part of these discussions in the past that our public safety team supported the concept of a roundabout to make northward turn movements off Brosh onto First easier, because they're not easy right now. And if Scott or Chief want to comment on that, I would welcome them to do so.
Certainly, Mayor, that has been an issue that's been addressed in the past. When the decision was made to create a more pedestrian-friendly environment on Brosh Avenue, and the narrowing of those lanes and the stacking effect that can occur there because there's no turn lane that no longer exists. The whole concept of the roundabout opens up the opportunity to have fluid movement of emergency vehicles. Obviously, both police and fire in our linker to the east use brush often and respond in that capacity many times. And so to have a more flow through of the intersection is critical. I mean, it just is. And so when the decision was made to narrow the lanes on Brosh and take away that turn lane, it creates that stacking effect, which happens often. If you've ever sat eastbound at First Street at the stop sign, you may wait a long time to move. And when apparatus is moving up that street, there's simply no place for them to go. And so that bottleneck does create problems currently. And I've heard that directly from the fire chief and the police chief, that condition exists. So the roundabout certainly would open up the flow of that and allow those vehicles to maneuver to their destination without that potential for that stack effect there. So that's a real condition that we've been dealing with since that change, and it will be that way until there's an improvement made there. So that's certainly a true statement, Mayor.
That's good to hear that it will probably improve their flow. The roundabout lanes currently designed are big enough to handle your largest equipment?
When we attended those design meetings throughout the process, we repeatedly said we've got to create a radius that would allow for that. They've designed it accordingly and have assured us that it will meet that, including what at that time was our largest aerial apparatus that we hadn't bought yet, but we had the specifications for, so they built it with that in mind, that our largest apparatus could maneuver that. Yes, sir. It's a good question. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Nathan. Again, appreciate the full discussion on this. It's a big project. Both of these projects, Benjamin and First and everything surrounding it, are very large investments for the city to make. But I think they're both necessary investments that will enhance public safety and spur new economic opportunities for us in the community and elevate quality of life, which means ultimately helping us retain youth here and attract new people. So I think it's important for us to keep an eye toward the future when we make these investments. And again, I think the council has done a very good job of that in recent years, realizing that for our community to continue to grow and be viable and prosperous in the future, we need to do some things a little bit differently. Benjamin Avenue was put off for years and years and years because it was a hard project. It was difficult, complicated, and nobody really wanted to make the decision to go forward because it was going to anger some people. It still will, but it needs to be done. And I think the same is true of the First Street project. So with that, unless there's any more comments or questions on this discussion, do I hear any? I would ask for your vote.
Voting in the affirmative, Arns, Merrill, McCarthy, Jackson. Voting in opposition, Granquist and Murin. We would need a fifth vote if the mayor would
I
provide
will vote
one.
yes.
And mayor will provide the fifth vote. With that, motion carries.
Okay, and that was all that's on the agenda, so that concludes this special meeting of the Norfolk City Council. Good afternoon.